You're now watching two old farts making noises.
Joe, do you want to know why some businesses succeed and some businesses fail? Why some businesses grow and some businesses don't? That's what this show is all about. Business, business, business. And for the people that are listening to this on a podcast at 6 o'clock in New York in the morning on a Saturday, if that didn't wake you up, nothing will.
Yeah, wakey. Wake up, America.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Lost Dollar Business Club. We do wake you up at 6 a.m. on Saturday.
Yes, we do.
Welcome. And we've got another good show for you, all folks.
An interesting show. A friend, this gentleman that's coming on, they call him, and David will say his proper name.
You've met him before.
Gandalf, the Gandalf of Web3. He's a friend of the show. He's been on before we were what we are today with like real people watching. I think we had 100 subscribers and now we have 30,000+. So good for him. Like everyone will hear what he has to say. So he's been on before. He's fascinating. So I'm looking forward to this. This should be an interesting dialogue. So
that's right. And it'll be an interesting conversation because it's about one of our favorite topics, Web3 and NFTs. So get ready to roll.
Yes. So do you want to bring just David, you want to introduce him, or Michael? Who would like to introduce our guest?
Well, let
Michael do it.
I'll introduce Keir Finlow-Bates. So he's our blockchain wizard. He's an expert on blockchain. He talks about decentralization, and he does it from his forest home in Finland. So that adds. I suppose maybe that explains the beard. But we'll have him on the show in just a moment.
All right, gentlemen.
Get the freedom and the flexibility of remote work in the lucrative tech industry. Bend your life around the world. Bandicoot is the premier course and community for thriving in a remote tech career. Join the revolution today. Bandicoot.com. Official partner of the Lost Dollar Business Club.
Very nice.
Right.
So, David, before we start and bring in our guest, do we have that other surprise commercial, or is that going to be in a couple of weeks?
A couple of weeks. I didn't.
Okay, next week. Next week you have a surprise commercial from almost a sponsor. There you go.
That's right.
I won't be here for it, but you have it. So, should we bring in our guest?
Let's bring in Keir.
Let's bring in our guest. There we go. There he is, ladies and gentlemen.
There's Keir, our blockchain Gandalf.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us from. Are you still in Finland?
Oh yes, I'm not going anywhere in a hurry.
Okay. Great. Well, I mean, we're very intrigued and interested in Web3 now that a lot of the hype around NFTs and Web3 has fizzled out. And now we can actually get to the meat and potatoes of what is really going on in Web3 and blockchain and NFTs. But I'm very curious a little bit about your background. How did you become the wizard of the Metaverse? And what does that even mean?
Well, actually, you have to go back to 2010 when somebody at the place I was working handed me a copy of Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin and electronic peer-to-peer cash system and said, you might find this interesting, with your maths background and the cryptography stuff that you've done. And I did. I found it technically really interesting. Like a lot of engineering types, I didn't buy any. So that's why I'm still working for a living rather than settled down on some tropical island. But, it's not a bad life. And then I just kind of kept up with what's been going on year on year on year. And it's been a fantastic ride. A lot of changes happening over time, and just the awareness of blockchain in general growing significantly.
Well, Well, you've been. I mean, the fact that you've been engaged with it since 2010 is impressive and really good, because you can give us a little bit of the arc for our listeners from 2010 to 2020 and now 2023. Can you give us just a broad arc as to what really has been happening in the blockchain Web3 world?
Right. So, I mean, you start off with blockchain and Bitcoin. And then in sort of 2011, 12, 13, you got all the Bitcoin clones, things like Litecoin, Dogecoin, and stuff like that. Then Ethereum comes along. Now you have smart contracts. And that's where it gets interesting for developers, because instead of writing software that kind of bolts onto the Bitcoin system, you're writing software that lives within the Ethereum system and adds a whole extra dimension. Then you had all the ICO mania and craziness, and scams unfortunately got huge.
That's right. Initial coin offerings, right?
Yeah, where they just kind of people would, because you could just create a token on Ethereum for a couple of $100 and then shill it and walk off with millions, and a lot of people did that, unfortunately. They all got swept out, and then I think the next phase was NFTs, which are these non-fungible tokens. So like coins, but each one is unique. And actually, there were kind of proto NFTs way before that. I think the first one was like 2014 on some less known blockchains. But it was really kind of the end of the previous decade that NFTs really took off. And we had all the mania and, let's release 10,000 animal themed images with, so that was kind of, it was like people getting overly excited about collectible cards, which have, baseball cards and
Beanie Babies.
Game cards. Yeah, exactly. They have their place in society, but the level of excitement was probably way in excess of what the market could bear, and that's why we kind of collapsed down into a few relevant, I suppose, historically interesting token things. And around about the same time as that, particularly because Facebook rebranded to Meta and said for a couple of years they were interested in it. The old Neil Stephenson idea from the novel Snow Crash, which I think came out in 1992. So, I mean, that's like over 30 years old, is this idea of a 3D virtual immersive world that people can enter into. And the bit that the Facebook type approach was missing is the economic system that Neil Stephenson was talking about in Snow Crash, which is that people owned plots of land in this virtual world. They had a virtual currency in the virtual world. People had control over their own assets in this virtual world, and that made it much more like real life. So it's not just walking around, a 3D game like Fortnite or something like that. You're actually kind of an independent entity with your own presence, your own agency, and your own possessions. But the hype curve, as usual, kind of peaked and then crashed down. And now we're sort of, I think, entering into a second phase where you haven't got lots of crazy investors throwing stupid amounts of money at metaverse projects. And as a result, people are actually having to think about what they're doing. Is there a business case for this? Is there an appeal to this at the user level that will actually make it either entertaining or useful? And so we're seeing people talking about how maybe at some point in the future, the metaverse will be the new interface that we use for interacting with computer systems. If you think about it, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, people are throwing actually money into the metaverse, but not where you would think. It's usually right now it's in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. They're throwing crazy money in it, like, because they get it, but they get it for 2030. Like, they understand it's this, we're building to. They understand it's not today. So I give them credit for that. The other thing which is interesting, when the pandemic came, that's when all of this really took off. NFTs, everything, like, it was because nobody could go do anything. Right. So it's like, what are we going to do? We'll just live on our computer. And I remember and I can't remember you may know it. I can't remember the guy, but he was selling property in the metaverse, and he was having cities. Miami joined, New York. All these cities were joining. The mayors were all excited, and he was selling it for millions of dollars. I met him at South by Southwest, and he was telling me this, and I'm like, why? Why am I going to spend $600,000 and put a yacht in a make-believe world? I can spend $600,000 and put it in the real world and actually enjoy it. So during the COVID, I think it went a little, as we would say in Yiddish, hazarai, went crazy. And I think now people are like, oh, okay. And I think it's going back to normal to grow for, if you will, 2030, where people now, like you, are saying, if we take it slow and do it proper, this is kind of where we'll end up in a good way, not a we're all going to be crazy and we all have to buy whatever, crypto algorithm today to become a trillionaire tomorrow.
Right. I mean, I guess it's a bit like that sort of old pioneer spirit thing where initially people were being told, oh, you can get a parcel of land out in the west or up in, the north in the Yukon or something and go and build a life there. And you think, that sounds great. And you pay stupid money for it and you pack up your wagon. And then when you get there, you find it's basically an arid desert or, a completely infrastructure-free prairie. Of course, a lot of those places 100, 200 years down the line, if you happen to pick the right bit of land, you may find out that your descendants end up having a prime bit of real estate. Right. So I think there was that dream that there's the opportunity to buy a block of on Manhattan Island before a single building had been put there. Right. And now we're finding, of course, all these copycat projects sprung up. And unfortunately, even the leading ones, like Decentraland and Sandbox, were very slow in actually producing anything to engage with. I have a Sandbox token myself, and I remember just sitting there thinking, what is going on here? They just seem to be spending all their money on marketing, getting big names in, and I can't even create a world that I can, my own little city or something in it. When is it going to be like Snow Crash?
But it's
we're still waiting, kind of.
Everyone's, but they're all waiting, right? It was the big hype, and it's sort of died down. But like WorldCoin as well, right? There was the big hype. You're going to get there'll be this orb. You'll put your eye in it, and you get these coins. And it's sort of I think Sam Altman just threw 100 million more into it, and it was like, look what I'm doing. And I'm thinking, I don't know if you understand how currency works, but yeah, that's still not backed by anything. And it's nice that you're the inventor or whatever of AI and whatever. Nobody cares. At the end of the day, I'm not a fan of the central bank, but I'm a fan of the central bank. Like, I know if something happens, at least in America, I can go and get money. They've proved it. They've bailed out banks. Let's take FTX, for example. If it crashes and I want to spend $40 million on a condo for my mom and dad, I'm not really getting my money back. So, there is a little to be said, as I guess governments now are trying to get into the digital, which they probably already are. But it's not the Web3, as we spoke last year with you, I don't think, turn out yet how it's going to be. And I think it's still at that infancy. And I think crypto as well. And I think NFTs as well. I think, and to your point, down the road, in whatever make-believe world we live in, or even in the real world, there'll be a value to it. I think right now people are still trying to figure out what to do with it. AR, VR, people see. I get it for concerts. I get it for sports. I get that. That's why I think the Saudis and the UAE and Qatar are putting money into it, because they get it for as their vision 2030. To make
right. Well, they have a second issue as well, right? Which is that the oil will not last forever. So they've woken up to the fact that they need to pour money into something while they still have it, so that they can pivot into a new lucrative area. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're doing some of these things that to an outsider may seem a little bit kind of excessive.
When you have a couple $1 trillion, though, right?
When you have
a couple $1 trillion and you spend, let's say, $1 billion on a football team, and that's soccer for you people in the United States, you make it up the next day in interest. It's sort of like, okay, what do you want to spend money on today? It's sort of like, we'll buy a golf team, we'll buy a building, so they're just, like, to your point, they're preparing for, if you will, 2030, their technology vision, but 2040 or 2050, sort of when the oil is done and everybody's supposedly going to be in whatever electric vehicle or solar vehicle. So I give them credit for that, but I also give them credit because we had meetings with them a few months ago. They're very in tune to it. They are probably more in tune to Web3, AR, VR, and all of that than anybody on the planet. I mean, like all their venture capital companies, if you talk to them about it, the light bulb goes off. They get it. When you talk to people in the United States, they get it, but they don't get it because they're all like, well, look at Meta. And we're like, yeah, Meta's a joke. That's
well, when you say they get it, what is it that they're getting that Americans aren't getting?
They understand what AR, VR, and headsets are. They understand that if there's one of the guys I know showed me this graph. There's got to be 500 people. Huh?
No, I know this is, we talk about Web3 and all these, interfaces, but maybe Keir can drill down on the plumbing behind all this, because Web3 is this beautiful little promise, but in the end, this decentralization isn't panning out, because you have all these interfaces that go through some pipes, and then they go to 2 or 3 companies that then
Yeah,
go
you're
to
right.
this supposedly decentralized database, which is called the blockchain. Yet we want privacy, but the blockchain is extremely it's an open book. So I'm wondering, where is it really going, all of this? And maybe
Right.
you have a
Yep. Well, I think it's worth moving away from the VR AR thing. That's the stuff that people like to latch on to initially, because it's good from a Hollywood perspective, right? It's visual, it's impactful, it taps into sort of sci-fi memes that people are familiar with.
yeah.
For me as an engineer, what I'm more interested in is the fact that we've moved. I guess the best summary is, if you look at this is a very, very kind of high level, not drilling down onto it too much. You can see us go from Web 1 to Web 2, and we are actually already at the beginning of Web 3. So Web 1 was servers giving you pages of information and allowing you to navigate between them. And there were very basic forms, or things called CGI interfaces, where you could send some information back to the server. But it was a dialogue between you and the server. And then in Web 2, they started attaching databases to the web servers. So now you can construct the web pages on the fly, and you can allow people to interact with the web page, and then other people can see their interaction. And that's where we get things like social media arriving, because I'm posting what I had for lunch on the internet, and all my friends get notified that that picture of my sandwich is now available. And it now may not seem so amazing, but if you go back to the early days of this, I was using something called LiveJournal in, I think it was 1999. It was really quite amazing that you could keep up with people from around the globe. And I've made friends that I still have 25 years on from using that kind of early social media platform. Now, of course, this is always the case with these things. Eventually, the big companies stepped in and then started monetizing it, and we became the product. And this is where Web3 comes in, which is that those databases are controlled by particular companies. And so if you're using your Facebook account to present your identity online, and you're clicking on the login using Facebook button, and then one day Facebook decides that you've posted something about a controversial political or health topic or financial topic that they don't like, and they cancel your account. Now it's like having your citizenship stripped by a government. And there's nothing you can do about it, right? Unless you're very rich and you take them to court. The average citizen, if they lose their account on Google or Facebook or whatever platform, they have very little, if any, redress. So with Web3, what I think the interesting thing is there is that you've brought in a new kind of database, the blockchain. And I know it's not a database, but it's the way it's worth looking at to start with for this, where you actually get to spin up your own identity. Anybody can create as many blockchain identities as they like. You just pick a large random number, you generate a blockchain address, that's now your identity on the blockchain, or you can have multiple ones. And so suddenly you have a lot more control over your identity in that space. And the second thing is, because it's using a database that is not controlled by Google or by Amazon or by Facebook or whoever, there's no party that can censor you. As long as it is truly decentralized, if you and I build some software on it, the major tech players can't stop us. It's like a runaway train now. It's just hurtling along, and it's functioning, and it's a public utility. It's available for anybody with the engineering skills to build on. And so that's kind of the start of Web3, harking back to what I was talking about with Snow Crash, with the idea that you own stuff in the metaverse. And that's why I think blockchain is a really important part of the metaverse, because that's a fundamental aspect, I believe, of the metaverse. And All we have at the moment to provide that is blockchain. Somebody may come up with something better in the future, but this is kind of, from my viewpoint, triggered what is really interesting about the metaverse, which is that you have your own independent, self-managed identity, and you have the opportunity to actually control your assets within it. But as you were saying, John, there are some extra issues, which are the presentation layer of a metaverse. Now, that is something that is still under control of an individual company. So, for example, I had a go building my own 3D world called the Authorverse. The land within the Authorverse is represented by NFTs. So the people who own it can trade it with other people, and I can't stop them, even though I invented the thing. I'm not in control of it in the way that Google controls Gmail, for example. But if you want to walk around your land and actually look at your NFT and then say, right, I'd like to go inside it and walk around the 3D world that my NFT represents, I'm the one providing the software that draws it for you. So I've happened to use a kind of a Roblox / Minecraft style world. And you can go to authorverse.land and explore it as a guest, or you can pick up a token. They're about $3 or so, because I'm not looking to make a profit off them. It's an intellectual exercise to learn about this stuff. But yeah, I do control that world. I don't control the individual lands within it, but I can decide tomorrow that it's going to be presented in monochrome instead of in color, or that it's no longer going to be a blocky voxel world anymore. I'm going to use Unity or Unreal. I'm going to now make it look more like Fortnite. And then if you're not happy with that, you don't really have much say about it. So
yeah, does that make you a dangerous man then?
Well, I don't think the Authorverse is much of a threat to the.
No, I'm just, because if you say you have that control over, that's the same as these other big companies also have control over the metaverse.
Yeah,
so
well,
we're free to a point, then it would seem again.
Yeah. Which is kind of what you have in functioning democracies, right? You're free to a point.
Yeah,
you're sort of bound by the laws of the land.
Let's not get carried away. Let's not get carried away on that. We think we can.
Ones, right?
Right.
But
Instead
the
of having a Facebook,
blockchain
we have
really
1,000 of
just
them.
is a pointer. Isn't the blockchain, this is how I understand it, is just a pointer to another server that holds the actual data? Is it so?
For an NFT, yeah, an NFT is just the way I look at it is it's like you have a database where the control over the individual rows, well, actually maybe a spreadsheet, because most people won't be programming databases, but most people have used Excel. Imagine a spreadsheet, a shared spreadsheet, but the individual rows in that spreadsheet are under the control of individual people. So I might control row 3 and you control row 4, and I can't enter any data into row 3. And in fact, for an NFT, the row has an identity for the NFT, so like a social security number for it, and it has a field that says who owns it, and that'll be my address. And then it has a link to an external file that tells you information about the NFT. And indeed, if that link is to a server that somebody controls, then the NFT record you own, but the underlying data you don't. But it's actually still pretty powerful to have a record that you control. Oh, and the final thing is really the only right you have with an NFT is to decide to either keep it or change the address in that field of the row that you control to somebody else's, at which point you no longer own it and they do, which is kind of how owning stuff and then giving it to somebody else works. So that simple. That it sounds like a very simple concept, but it actually carries a lot of significance to it, because it gives you this digital thing that you own in the way that normally we ascribe to real world stuff, right?
Like owning like having a deed.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with a deed of, actually, I suppose if you talk about being maybe a bearer bond or something would be more relevant, right? Because and even there you had a problem. I mean, I sort of think of it as it's actually the odd thing is that the real world allows for clear ownership of stuff, right? I mean, here I've got a roll of electrical tape here. That's mine. It's not yours. And what's more, I can't just copy it and give you another roll of electrical tech magically. The fact that the universe has that property, we just take it for granted because you've experienced it since you were born. But when you come at it from a computing perspective, it's like really odd. And it's taken a lot of work to emulate that in a virtual or a digital world. And that is what blockchain is doing. It's creating these data entries that particular individuals have control over. And then you can start building a whole bunch of stuff on that. And NFTs have problems because the people who have been dealing with them haven't really thought through the significance of all the aspects to them. So one of the issues you mentioned is one, which is that if you have a link to something off the chain, and that link is to a server off the chain controlled by an entity, then they can change your what your asset looks like to other people. But you can do that at lots of different levels, right? Let's say I mint an NFT that represents a magic sword called Excalibur, and I have a link to a server that has a JPEG of a magic sword. So yeah, if I control that server, I can change the image of the sword into an image of a banana if I want to. And now suddenly your amazing magic sword is laughable. Maybe I don't change it, but and somebody builds a game that recognizes that NFT as a valid in-game item, right? So now you turn up, you log in with your blockchain wallet. They then determine that you own the Excalibur NFT, and they render your character with a sword. Well, that's great. Except that one day they may say, hang on, let's just render his character with a banana. Right now, your NFT still points to a server that has an image of the sword. But when you go into this game provided by some other party, they've decided that, yeah, we're not going to respect it anymore. We're going to display it as something else. And so it's kind of, you get these different layers of presentation that different people still have control
that are all variable.
Yes. And I mean, there are people hacking away at trying to decentralize this stuff more and more. So you can put the pointer to the image of the NFT. You can have it point at something called the IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, which is a decentralized file system and that means the immutability of the record on the blockchain and the immutability of it points to a file on the IPFS and it can only be that file. So there's two choices. Either you get the picture of Excalibur or nobody's kept a copy and you get nothing. And that means that if you own Excalibur, you can host your own IPFS server and you can host your image of Excalibur and your NFT works fine. You can also post code, JavaScript or something, or web pages on the IPFS. So now you have the opportunity to have decentralized websites and more browsers are supporting the IPFS. So if you've got, for example, the Brave web browser, you can type an IPFS link in the search bar of the Brave browser, and it'll actually go to the IPFS and retrieve the file that refers to. It will tell you that it couldn't find it. And so that means you can start putting web pages on the IPFS. And so now you have a decentralized website and you have a decentralized database. So you can build things that are truly and completely decentralized and out there, and people can't change them.
Who owns the IPFS?
Nobody does. I mean, it's like saying who owns Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin exists because a bunch of people are running nodes. That's why we have it. Lots of people are keeping copies of it, but you can't point at someone and say they own it. And the IPFS is the same. You can spin up an IPFS node on your computer, and now you're one of many servers that are hosting files that are addressed by what the file is. So that, and interesting files get copied onto lots of different servers. Files that people are not so interested in may get dropped. And then if you want to find them later, they're gone. So if you're really interested in a particular file, you should host it yourself. But yeah, nobody owns the IPFS in the same way that nobody kind of owns the internet. It's a network.
But let me ask you this. When's a normal person? So you're an engineer, right? So you get it. I'm going to assume the four of us, if you just said, go and do what you just said, we'd all look at each other like the RCA dog. So
we're not doing that.
We're
not going to host a server.
We're not even going to be able to write the code to make Excalibur. So when is it going to get, in your opinion, between say now and 2030 or 2040,
it's
where
really hard
the normal person can come on and just do it without all the rigmarole?
It's really hard to say. I mean, what I will observe is not just the rate at which things are changing is fast, but the rate at which the rate is changing is fast. Right? I mean, I first started playing around with computers in the early 80s, and I first got to mess around with a networked computer in 1989, and first access to the internet was 1990. First web page I saw was 1994. I mean, you look back at this stuff and it looks antique, right? I mean, that kind of was like the equivalent of the car at the end of the 1800s. And then suddenly something happened in the late 90s. We had a dot-com boom and then a crash, but then things just kept running anyway. It's just that the money went elsewhere for a while and people started doing real stuff. And it just accelerated and accelerated. So, and the fact is that, if you take non-technical people and are there now with their mobile phones connecting to web servers, interacting with stuff there, that to people who, to Gen Xers, this is Star Trek stuff from their childhood for real, right? And it's just getting quicker, and the stuff is, and it's getting easier for people to do it. Right? So maybe you can't do it at the moment, but the fact is that an 18-year-old with a passion for it can do it, right?
I had the sort of the feeling, Ken, it's a bit like when desktop publishing first came out. I remember how excited I was to have I bought a PostScript printer, which I could have bought a car for the same amount of money. But then all of a sudden you could actually print real stuff. And I felt really liberated by that. I think maybe we're slowly stepping towards that with Web3. That it was.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
the tools will be so simple that even people like me can use them.
Yeah, and I mean, I bet actually when you got the printer, you learned how to use it because you spent so much money on it, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
Probably actually in hindsight wasn't that simple, but once you've gone and blown your 2-year car budget on an electrical device, you're going to actually take the time to read the manual, and then eventually the price drops, and then the interfaces change so that it becomes really simple. I mean, I used my first technical job. I was a technical writer, and we had to use a desktop publishing software package called FrameMaker. I was incredibly hard to use, right? When I wrote my last book, I just did it in LibreOffice. It's like free software. I mean, the amount that the company was paying for a license for me to use FrameMaker, and then I think I had to go on a 2-week training course, and it just, it was not simple. And we'll forget about, at the time, it took me to set up my Solaris Spark station to actually run the software. But now I can just go to a local electronics store, buy a laptop, stick a word processor on it, and I can write a book. And then I can go to Amazon KDP, and they'll print it and ship it for me. You do not have to be an amazing technical expert. So the fact is,
is Web3 dead for you, or is it struggling? Is it are we past the hype and on the?
I think we're in the really good bit, right? We're in the what's it called? Not the trough of disillusionment, but the plateau of realistic expectations.
We're in the proper stage without the disillusionment.
Exactly. Yeah, it's where people can actually. I mean, I find the peak of the hype curve the most frustrating thing ever. I mean, for starters, I get masses of spam requests from people, and people who, and you're just kind of stuck in this world where there are people doing absolutely nonsensical stuff and posting on LinkedIn how they have received 20 million for doing it. So you kind of, and you're there doing something that you think is significant, but because you can't explain it in a 6-slide pitch deck in sentences with words with no more than 2 syllables, preferably no more than 6 words in the sentence, you don't get any funding. This is the point where you can people will actually take the time to try and understand what it is that you're doing, and actually see, and they're not and it's because they're not looking to make a quick buck, right? And that's once you've got investors actually thinking in terms of we're going to hopefully have a liquidity event in 5 years' time, whereas back during the Web3 hype, and then we're talking about liquidity events within 9 months. It's just-
9 minutes. What do you mean 9 months?
yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I
Well,
gave
if
you
they-
money at noon. Why aren't we exiting at 12:15? So
Yeah,
it's the same
I
thing.
mean, it almost was that crazy. It really was. This is the thing with these the coins that they would have with the token, and then the whole thing was. And I think a lot of people didn't realize that it was a scam. I mean, I actually have a book, Evil Tokenomics, which is about what these projects are doing. The fact is that half the founders I talked to weren't aware that what they were doing amounted to a scam.
Neither
they
were
just
some
got caught.
governments.
Oh yeah, and the regulators were still too busy trying to work out.
That's a whole nother show. And
Yeah.
we know you have, we know you have to go. So if you want to come back, we can talk about that part of it, the regulators,
Yes,
the scam, and what that would be.
Yes,
We could do that next year if you'd like, based on scheduling. But we know you have to go because you have another thing. So for all of us, thank you very much. Have a happy and
Thank
healthy,
you. Thank
and
you
we'll hopefully see you in
jumping in at the
2024.
last minute as well.
Yeah.
Which is
Thank you,
I
Keir.
appreciate.
Really appreciated it. Thank you very much for having me on, and good luck. I look forward to the next lot of shows.
All right,
See you
Gandalf.
soon. Cheers. Have a great day. Cheers.
All right.
I like
All
him.
right.
He's
That was
very
a
smart.
but
man.
you know what? You saw how he's, he described at the higher level that the Web3 is, and the decentralization and all of this, it's bullshit because everything goes. It is.
I know, John.
And
Why did
Michael
you just
put
say
that.
that to him?
Tell us, John.
Michael, thank you for that. The first article that you posted, wow, I was like, I knew there was something to it, but I got a little bit more of the detail of the plumbing, and then the plumbing is the nut of it, right? Because
who really owns it? Who's really running the show?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's still a substrate that has to be owned by someone.
Yeah,
Correct.
that file that it's your NFT, you don't even freaking own it. It's on a server, and you don't know where the hell it is. And that guy or that company or whoever says, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to the Yukon. I gotta do a thing. Took servers off. You lost that NFT. You just had a little. You had
that's
a point
part
there.
of the other issue we had, because if you remember, we looked into NFTs. Is like if you're on one blockchain, it doesn't transfer over to the other blockchain. So like if John's on A and you're on B and I'm on C and I want to give you guys my thing, I can't even do that. So to Gandalf's point, I would literally have to have my own server. I would have to do that. So it's not yet for the everyday person. And it's great that an 18-year-old kid that doesn't really have a life other than he goes to high school and they don't teach him anything and he wants to learn. That's great that he can build it. But if you wanted to adopt, the normal person who goes to work or works out of their home has got to be able to log into their computer and go clicky, 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 done. And that's
nobody's
it.
hosting any freaking server to host their own shit that they own.
No kidding, John.
That's just not happening.
And here's another part of it. We still got law, right? We still got, imagine, Steve, you've got this server and you've got this blockchain. It grows and people think it's amazing. And it becomes like $1 billion industry, and then you get hit by a bus.
Right.
Now what?
Right? Now you're screwed. Unless I gave the code to one of you guys.
Back up the keys.
Yeah. Or your wife gets it. Now she's fighting over whoever has the key. Right.
Well, wait.
It's in limbo legally.
Yeah, we have real life though. John was holding the keys for us on our NFT thing, and John thought he lost his laptop. I get this text message from him that's like, I'm really sorry. So, Nunzio and Razzo went to break his legs in Argentina, or Uruguay, wherever he was. But we literally had 8 people scrambling around the world to change and do and this and that because his laptop was holding the golden key. So I'm excited about what may come, but I'm going to stick with the Middle East the way they think. 2030 is when it comes because you still are going to have to make it that it's easy for anybody, whether they're 5 years old or 500 years old, to open the laptop, clicky, clicky. And unfortunately, this is going to be kind of like AI. There's no such thing as privacy. It's nice that Web3 talks about it, but at the end of the day, there's not.
That's why I'm not very bullish on Web3 is because it presumes that it's doing that because you can't trust anyone. It says it's a trustless system. You can't trust the government. You can't trust any organization. And so it gives you these things that say, but you can do it yourself. because you can theoretically trust yourself. But
Yeah.
the thing is, you can't. Most people can't trust themselves to maintain keys, to maintain these servers, to maintain the.
People can't remember their passwords. How are you going to have them trust themselves?
And the thing is, what's wrong with actually rebuilding trust in governments or organizations or
Never happening.
associations?
Never happening. Listen, the last Illuminati meeting, we've already decided that no, we're just taking over the world and killing all of you. Just so you're aware.
You don't want to trust me with the keys. I skip lunch.
Yeah, but forget the keys. The whole plumbing, is just
it's not good.
You have to trust somebody.
Well, guys, you can trust me because we're now going to Lost and Found.
Welcome to this week's Lost and Found, uncovering dollar winners and losers, where we discuss dollars lost and dollars gained by various companies and projects.
Oh, Lost and Found, one of my favorites. This is so much. There's so much this week. This is going to be great. We're going to go with John first because John doesn't have anything and he's not prepared. All right, so John's out. You're out, John. Kurt, we'll go to you. Then we'll go to Michael. Then me, and then we'll go to David. So John's Lost and Found is Zip. Kurt, what do you have?
I wish I could say mine was Zip. The National Bank of Canada fiscal. Fourth quarter earnings, $565 million in its fiscal fourth quarter. Now, John, I'm sure you can do the math on that. There are people in the U.S. carrying that in their wallet.
That is nice. And their digital wallet with blockchain and Bitcoin and stuff. Yeah, Michael, what do you have on the top of that news?
Well, okay, so this is a topic that I think people should just be aware of in general, is that NVIDIA, that $1 trillion GPU company, just a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago, launched their Omniverse, and it's doing pretty well. I mean, it's a $30 billion operation, or $30 billion operation, which is a digital replica of the actual world, including physics, so that you can do testing, industrial testing of equipment inside this virtual world. And I'm excited about that because NVIDIA is a powerful company that very visionary.
Does it cover theft?
Well, that's they have to probably have their own bots in there to protect you. But
this is exciting because I've got some things I want to test out. because they're not legal in certain countries. Anyway,
wait, I do have one.
Okay, John, what do you have?
Go ahead, John.
All right, so if you were invested in clean energy, right, solar and windmill, pipe dreams in the last 6 months, right? The universe of public companies that are involved in this sort of, I'll call it fake green revolution. They've lost 30 billion in the last 6 months. Yeah.
And look at that. The Bank of Canada made 500 million in the last quarter. Now they're only 29.5 billion away from helping them out. I like that. Look at that positive. That was a positive, John. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, John.
My two things are going to be really quick. One, Virgin Atlantic on Tuesday flew a vegetable oil plane. The vegetable oil or French fry grease or whatever from London Heathrow to JFK. Apparently, when everybody got off, the dogs in New York ate them because they smelled delicious. So I think that's interesting, but I think it's bull. I don't think it's sustainable. But I thought it was an interesting thing to happen. And the other one,
they do get 10 out of 10 for marketing, though. Right?
Yeah, that was very cool. I thought that was very cool. Yeah, good PR. I'm glad that they did that. And there's so many others. I'm not even going to go with the second one. Now, everybody that's listening that knows David, sit back because now we're going to hear what mouse or dog or cow is saving the world and we're on another planet. All right, David, how are we going to do?
Well, it's something quite boring really this week because we know that we know that the thing that pollutes the planet at a phenomenal rate is fast fashion. And fashion and apparel. It's the incredible amount of waste that's all around the industry. that's why if you buy some merchandise from 2F Entertainment or from Lost Art Business Club, it's always print on demand. So we don't hold stock. We don't let people buy, stack it all up and waste before you buy it. So you buy it, you get it. But anyway, outside of that, the new revolution seems to be 3D weaving. And this is going to be something which is going to be absolutely mega. They tested it. They did it's a Dutch company that's leading this. They've been testing it. They did a pilot catwalk in Copenhagen. They now have a patent for it as well. And the technique is called whole garment weaving. And what it does is it makes everything in one complete run through these special machines. All you need to do is literally to cut out the shape as it comes out the other side. It's all joined together. It's got labeling in it. It's got everything that you need. So it's cut down waste to virtually nothing.
Wow.
So
very nice.
Yeah.
That wasn't as crazy as your normal stuff, David. I don't know what to say.
It's a found dollar for me.
All right. Well, next week, everybody, we have Mr. Gay, who is running for president. So we have a big next week. I won't be here. Big show next week. I know it's going to be you guys. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to watch this show. So next week we have a presidential debate. The week after we have a gentleman named Kevin Wolf who's going to be talking about a wind farm project that he's doing. And then there's possibly somebody that's right now sitting in UAE at the climate change summit that may be on the 21st. So we're seeing what we can do about that to talk about ESG and why that's a bunch of bullshit. But other than that, for all our Jewish friends, happy Hanukkah, because Hanukkah starts on the 7th, and the next show for us will be on the 8th, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So have a happy Hanukkah, our first night or 2 nights of Hanukkah. We will see you next week, next Saturday at 6 a.m. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or go to the merch store and save the planet, apparently. And then there you go. Gentlemen.
Well, it's all print on demand.
Thank you.